Anxiety at its core is anticipation of an adverse future event. It's a mental projection of how things will unfold, often casting the future in the worst possible light. When we allow anxiety to take root, we are essentially predetermining the outcome of our circumstances, assuming the worst, but also negating what God can do or might do in the situation. This kind of worry is more than a fleeting concern. It actually becomes a habit of the heart that replaces God's presence with fear. It takes a circumstance often beyond our control, and it turns it into an overwhelming burden that we carry as if God were not involved. In doing so, anxiety functions as a faith killer. It sabotages our faith, our walk with the Lord. It paralyzes us in the present, and it robs us of the peace and the trust that we ought to have in God's providence and His promises. Consider the words of Jesus in Matthew 6:25-27. You're familiar with them. He said, "Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life?" Jesus calls us to trust in God's sovereignty over all things. Anxiety, on the other hand, it suggests that we are in control, or worse, that God is incapable of handling our situation, our problems, our relationships. When we allow ourselves to be consumed by worry, we are essentially telling God, "I don't trust you. I believe this outcome will be bad, no matter what you do." Anxiety replaces God's role in our lives. It shifts our focus from His ability to care for us to our powerlessness. Instead of relying on God, we lean into fear, anticipating the worst. And in doing so, we're denying God the space to work in our hearts. This posture is the epitome of faithlessness. Yet we are called to a different kind of faith, a faith that rests in the knowledge that God will act according to His will and His good purposes for us. Philippians 4:6 reminds us of this truth. "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Rather than letting anxiety define your future, bring your concerns to God. Replace worry with worship. Shift your gaze from the worst that could happen to the one who controls everything. Remember that anxiety, it predetermines a future without God's involvement, but faith anticipates a future with God's grace.